Matt, what do you think of Thailand?
That's beautiful.
Yeah?
It's so beautiful.
So here we find ourselves in this tropical island, which is, you can drive around it on a moped. It's about 20k drive around it. So Matt and myself have done the tour this morning, and it's just such a beautiful, quaint little place, off a place in Thailand called Krabi.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on our little spin around this morning?
That was very meditative. I'd never really been on a motorcycle until this one experience, partially out of lack of nerve, and maybe lack of opportunity, but mostly lack of nerve. And I never quite understood why people have this mystique about being on a motorcycle. I've known people who take it very seriously, and I've never respected it so much. But actually having now been on a motorcycle, which wouldn't have happened were it not for you, giving us that little wonderful training lesson beforehand. I get it. It was a very meditative experience, just cruising, being on the other side of the road. Thailand, you don't drive on the side of the road that I'm used to in Canada. So that took a little bit of getting used to, and I did have a few flubs, forgetting my location and almost drove into some traffic. But that being said, I corrected myself early on, and it's very enjoyable.
Yeah, no, you took to it well, like a duck to water would be the metaphor. Yeah,
Sure.
And we to give anybody who's watching a bit more context, we Matt and Cynthia did a cracking presentation in Ko Samui at a place called the Green Light Cafe, and we've got a little group there which I'm a part of, which is called the Critical Thinkers Group. And Matt and myself met after that presentation with Cynthia, and we were invited down to this little part of Thailand, and we're kind of staying in this fantastic resort, and we caught up for dinner last night, and some very interesting conversations around the dinner table. Really cool to be in a group of like-minded people who get what's going on in the world. But what would your kind of thoughts of the theme of the group that we're in at the moment be?
Now or during the conference?
But either or both. Yeah.
Well, I think there's a general commitment to trying to make sense of reality. There's a general understanding that our perceptions are not the keys to reality per se, but that we are living in a web of shadows animated by dishonest actors that would like to portray a very false reality to us. So we're all trying to make sense of how to cultivate our mind's powers to understand that which is behind the surface appearance of things. So there's a lot of people with different colorings to their understanding, their hypothesis of what the more substantial reality is. There's no two thoughts that are exactly similar, but everyone's sort of moving towards a similar destination point in a very loving way. So there's a lot of fun debates I had over all sorts of topics, ranging from the nature of the oligarchy to the structure of physical space-time to the idea of what is the nature of the mind, what is knowable, not knowable. What is it? We've had some people I was chatting with about, whether the Earth is flat, cube, or any other shape. Overall, it's just this open-minded spirit of inquiry and a desire to have honest discussion around things that matter that I think was the most gratifying experience across the board. And going back to the individuals that I encountered at the conference that we were a part of at Ko Samui, I was really, really gratified to just encounter such a wide spectrum of people, some of whom flew in from overseas, from the US, from Canada, from Australia, and beyond, just to come to the conference. But many were already there, and most of the people had very just incredible, diverse, enriched backgrounds, careers that had brought them through some incredible journeys with some fun stories. Treasure hunting people who had managed multinational corporations, and just came out of that whole process with a slew of valuable insights, anecdotes that your average run-of-the-mill conversation in polite society would not grant you. And despite the vast spectrum of experiences, some people were extremely wealthy, working from the city of London throughout most of their careers. Other people had a more humble story. There was a total respect because of everyone's just common equal disdain for lies and desire to stand up for truth that I thought was very, very gratifying.
And it's we had the discussion before that when you were and I kind of have to do this well. You have to be in character as a researcher or as a presenter, and it was really nice to see both Cynthia and yourself be comfortable to let that go and just to chill out and to relax and to let your hair down. And I think I said to you, I wanted to pull Matt aside and explore that person who is Matt, as opposed to the incredible researcher that Matt is, and the author and the this and the that. So and again, I actually now I realize I don't know the answer to this. So, and I think we touched on it before. So you're growing up. I think I might have heard you relate this to a couple of other people. So you're growing up in Canada, I guess. And were you a conventional young man, or even a kid, or were you a bit strange, or were you as methodical as you are now? Who were you as a youngster?
Oh, okay, yeah, you're going for the youth.
I'm going straight to the origins of Matt.
The real origins.
Yeah.
My mother says that I didn't kick too much in the womb. I was a pretty passive fetus.
Passive fetus. I don't think I've ever heard that expression by anybody before.
A satisfied fetus overall. Wasn't aching to get out that fast.
Yeah,
I think I was
just chilled out.
Yeah, just chilled.
Just
I was
going along for the ride.
What I've been told, it was very tolerable.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll skip some steps, I guess, in terms of my personal memories. I think that nobody wants to say that they were just a normal kid, but I guess I wasn't just a normal kid. I'm looking for some quirk or foible. I don't think I had anything specifically interesting that would really stand out. I was an only kid, so maybe there was a quality of maybe feeling like the center of attention early on, or the world revolved around me. Might have caused some ego issues later on that I had to struggle with, perhaps. Yeah. Not having to share my toys and stuff.
Yep.
Perhaps. I don't know. But I also think I was a pretty pensive kid.
Yeah.
Being an only kid, you don't play around with other kids, and oftentimes, we didn't have neighborhoods where we had a lot of other children either, so I was usually having to deal with my own imagination. So picking up drawing, and immersing myself in just drawing all day long was something I had to do as something that ended up just cultivating a bit of a tendency to introspect quite a bit. And coming up with my own stories in my head was something I guess I had to do by default, just to be a kid and be playful with no other kids around. So
and that requires a fair bit of imagination, doesn't it? Because I can relate a little bit to that.
Yeah, I did.
In my childhood.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Right, you had to come up with scenarios, right? And how much of that was internally generated, I don't know. Like I watched a lot of cartoons, so maybe I was like replaying elements from G.I. Joe or He-Man that I was immersing myself into. I was coloring my own imagination, but whatever. It was fun, and I think that I did have a tendency towards existentialism. I think when I was like in daycare, I remember my first sort of moment of when you sort of realize that you have an ontological being, and I was like, I remember looking at my hand and realizing like, this is not me. And I remember like literally the first daycare I was in, I must have been 5 years old, and I remember that moment sitting waiting for my parents to pick me up or something, and I just remember like opening and closing my hand. I was like, this is not me. I'm making this happen.
So as in almost like a consciousness that sits outside of yourself,
like
that knows you're directing that
exactly.
meat body.
There's that like I am more than my body thing. Like there's this thing making my body do things that isn't my body. So I remember that like making me really dizzy. I almost got a bit nauseous, and I didn't want to think about it again. I remember like doing this thing with my hair, and just running away to play with some toys or something to forget about it. And a few of those types of experiences happened. That ontological, existential feeling. Yeah. So the fact that they were forever memories for me means that they must have had some meaning or some coloring in my life. But otherwise, no. Otherwise, I didn't really have much of an intellectual identity. I don't think. I mean, I if anything, I wasn't a book reader.
Yeah, really?
I think I read my first book for leisure or pleasure when I was maybe 20.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So I think for the most part, I tried to be a good person, but I didn't really have much bearing. I didn't really have much of a sense of a political identity. My family wasn't a family that really had political commentary or opinions as a cultural phenomenon in the household. So this I didn't have much of that. So for me, most of the experiences that shaped, I think, the character who I'm trying to become was after my well into my early 20s, when I had my little jolts of reality around, big narratives being a lie that you're living in.
So before that, so you go through school, nothing outstanding. Then I think you said that you just got this fascination with the arts.
Yeah.
And when you decided to study the arts, it was a huge letdown.
Yes.
Explain that. That was I enjoyed that when you were telling me that.
Well, I always saw myself, and everyone would tell me when I was in elementary school or high school that that they like my art. And so that encourages a youngster to continue that. And I did enjoy comic books and things. So I did develop an aptitude to draw, to paint, to try to communicate ideas sequentially and through that medium. And that was a passion that I saw myself doing, perhaps as a comic book artist, a storyboard artist. I wasn't too sure. And in high school, I started encountering some art history classes as well. That was giving me a better appreciation for Renaissance art that I found to be very beautiful. And I was getting excited about the prospect of being able to explore this domain of expression of beauty that I could see was something that animated some really beautiful productions well before I was born. And I thought going into high school that perhaps this would be, or university, that this would be something I would be given access to. The methods of thinking of how these great Da Vinci's, these Rembrandts were able to compose, as well as, obviously my illustration background was something that was going to be the thing that might pay my bills as I did comic books or whatever. And what I found we have in Quebec something called CEGEP. It's sort of between high school and university. There's this thing for a couple of years you could do a career program, and I did a 3-year program in illustration and design, and it gave me some technical skill sets that were good. But what I found was that those who were in the program, the best that they could aspire towards was generally some form of commercial art that would not allow really any freedom of creative expression on their own. You'd be lucky to work for become a graphic design person at a video game company or something. That's like the best you could hope for. And most students were satisfied with that. But I was aching for something that had a little bit more creative freedom. So after I got through that, I found myself going into university in fine arts and film animation, film studies, thinking that would be something that would satisfy it. But even there, it turned into the opposite extreme, which was purely random emotional expression with the philosophical system of the fine arts programs in the universities that I was encountering encouraged this idea that mind thought was something antagonistic to the creation of good art. So your emotions and your thoughts would get in the way if you didn't follow rules? They were of this formula that art should just be purely the expression of raw emotion, unbounded by any type of thinking that was intelligible.
So what? So in other words, you just go with your feeling and don't plan anything. Is that?
Go with your feeling, but there's this weird dishonesty about it because they ultimately want you to justify because it was based upon a philosophical postmodernistic deconstructionism.
Yeah.
That was pretty pervasive amongst academic artists that prized hyper abstract contemporary art that was detached from any intentions. So the idea is the reason why society, and there's a whole philosophical framework justifying this that comes out of the Frankfurt School.
Yeah.
As I came to later on discover, I didn't know it at the time, that presumes that society is rotten intrinsically, and that whatever goodness or order that appears to be the case in society is an illusion hiding the ugliness and hypocrisy of human nature that is the true essence of reality. And it's a sort of synthesis of some Marxist mixed with Freudian and Weberian analysis that was generating the Frankfurt School misanthropic way of looking at the universe and human beings that said, well, because that's the case, if we want to liberate society, which we should all do as artists, so there was a moral ideal behind it, but a messed up one, because it was based on a premise that was fallacious, then the best thing you can do as an artist is to express the ugliness of that world in its true essence, even though that world might have the appearance of goodness. The true artist knows the evil of things, and by being as disgusted and cultivating your feeling and sensibilities of disgust, you will then be able to wield and deploy that emotion in your artistic creations to render, be a mirror of the ontological reality of that disgusting ugliness that would then cause people who would view it to squirm uncomfortably as you liberate them from their passivity and their inclination to just be adaptive to the fake Maya of the world, right?
So give me this in layman's terms.
Yeah.
So if I was looking at I don't know, Caravaggio or Michelangelo or who do this realism type painting, and I don't have an artistic background, so I'll probably butchering the terminology, but I'm sure if some people are watching, they might have a similar level of knowledge to myself. So what would be a well-known example of what you've described? Would the kind of again, the Michelangelo, the Caravaggio, whatever, would they be the opposite of what you're describing, or because it seems like these themes of beautiful gardens and beautiful women show the beauty.
The thing with I think the quality of the type of classical art that animated or that was the expression of the sorts of bursts of qualitative change in human history that we characterize as Renaissance periods. And I'm not just talking about the Western, but also you could look at the Renaissance movements in ancient China, Chinese history, Indian history. Any part of the world has moments of Renaissance periods and moments of decay, of dark ages, where we forget things we once knew, whereas the periods where we're discovering aspects of nature, both in its in all of its manifestations, intellectual understanding of nature, but also the aesthetical appreciation of nature beauty-wise and ability to render and express that natural law is increased in all of its facets: sound, the science of sound, music, arts, sculpture, architecture, as well as, and you'll usually find all of these things developing together with scientific discoveries.
How close would this be as an analogy? And just something that popped into my head. So would you be talking about, one of these classic pieces by Mozart, which kind of uplifts you, and then all of a sudden in the modern era we have grunge, or we have, I don't know, emo music, or is that a similar metaphor for what you were trying to explain with art, or am I off?
No,
it's
similar, but I think to frame it, I just wanted to say, I guess, because these are very difficult concepts to put into words, so I think
that's why I'm trying to use analogies. I think I know what you're saying.
You're saying, like, if you contrast like what happens in the mind of a Mozart and the person who listens actively to a Mozart composition versus somebody who's producing a 1990s grunge piece or listening to it, there's something different going on in the creator and the consumer of that artistic. But the question is, what is that difference? Because in both cases, you have melody, you have harmony, you have something happening in a sequential time frame, right? A beginning, middle, and end.
And possibly you also have something that gives you the spirit some joy if you listen to Vivaldi and whatnot, and then you have this other, I don't know, satisfaction of feeling the pain of that song that expresses these raw emotions about fuck the world or whatever it is.
Yep. I mean, but that could also give you pleasure as well.
Which it does.
Of
course it does.
Yeah, that's why, and that's why it's popular. So it's not. There's something to it though in terms of edification, because there's different types of pleasure, right? Not all types of pleasure are created equal.
Yeah.
So in terms of the pleasure that is allowed to be even sad and even dissonant.
Yeah.
As one could see that there's dissonances in Beethoven's dissonant quartets.
Yeah.
And there's dissonances in heavy metal and Pantera. So there's dissonances in both.
Yeah.
there's variations on themes. There's modes that are used that change, right? So there's a lot of things that are the same, but there's things that are also different.
Yeah.
And it's looking for, I think the exercise is looking for I guess for scientific terms, the tensor, like what is the same in systems that appear different. And then also by looking at, well, what is the same, then we can also start contrasting what is different, both in terms of their material aspect and, as you pointed out, in terms of what they are, what was inside the heart and mind of the composer and those who experience the production as well. Because you always get a little bit of the creator awoken in the soul of the person who is giving their admiration or being moved by the artistic creations of a creator. So there's something of the creator's essence that are being awoken inside the soul, for good or for bad. And if you have a lot of unresolved hate inside your heart as a creator, somebody who has that sense of disgust that is not edifying for the soul, that is contaminating your creative composition when you're inspired, then it stands to reason that an element of that same quality will tend to be awoken or evoked.
But only
within.
if they express that. And
Only
you know,
if they express that.
I mean, I've just, what jumps into my mind is actors who have these almost impossibly perfect expressions, and then behind the scenes you realize that they are doing bullshit things.
Jury has found the American comedian Bill Cosby was liable for sexually assaulting a woman at the Playboy Mansion in 1975 when she was just 16 years old. The court also ordered that Cosby must pay Judy Huth, who's now 64, $500,000 in damages. She spoke of her relief after the victory in court. Mark Lobel reports.
Justice for Judy Huth, after the man, known to millions as America's dad, Bill Cosby, is found by a jury at a civil trial to have abused her more than 40 years ago at the Playboy Mansion.
Another one might be the pastors who are taking drugs and
they might say something genuinely edifying at the pulpit, and then behind the scenes they're banging their altar boys or something, right?
That's exactly right.
And that you can't take away the fact that somebody in the church was edified by the authentic message. Maybe the person believed it and felt it as they were speaking it, but they were not one with themselves and were living a dual life.
Yeah.
There's that aspect of it.
And then as the observer, who is almost putting this person on a pedestal, and seeing only that forward expression without that darkness. I mean, they're not picking up on any darkness, are they? Yeah. Okay.
You can't take that away from people either, right? So that shouldn't remove the the fact that we live in a universe of substance. The universe has substance, and I think when we are, not everybody is consistent with themselves. Some people are really out of whack with themselves, and if you are gratified by a piece of music, a piece of work done by somebody who is ultimately really underdeveloped and maybe even degenerate without resolving all of their internal dissonances, and they're doing terrible things, you can't remove the fact that somebody who received something from their work that made them more edified, that happened. And then you have those who are actually of other degrees living in an oligarchical society, which we've always lived in an oligarchical society. There are certain actors, creators, who are much more self-aware of what they're doing, of the deceits that they're cultivating, and that they wish to create or to spread as a net to attract the fish, the human fish, into a net of false beauty that will keep them pacified by design in order to make them more malleable, using a false imagery of beauty as well.
Recent concert, Taylor Swift is performing witchcraft. I know this is going to raise some controversy in the comments, but this just doesn't look right to me.
We want to signal that'll meet you
Okay, so I think that's really relevant, which is taking us off on a tangent, which I quite enjoy. Did you see much of the Eurovision Song Contest?
No.
Okay, are any pictures or anything like that? Or
I have actually seen some excerpts.
Okay,
of the train wreck. Yeah.
And basically. And did you see the Irish entry?
No, I saw the Ukrainian one, which
Bambi
was
Thug.
Oh, good.
And it's this, and again, it's an oxymoron, non-binary performer who basically went through a satanic ritual with her dancers or his dancers or whatever they had. I don't know what they want to call themselves, and it's this kind of emaciated person with short cropped hair, demonic makeup, you know.
Guess you'd rather have a star than the moon. I guess I always overestimate you. Who do all the things that you do? I'm down, down in my doomsday blues.
The kind of outfit they were wearing was kind of these suspenders with blood splashed lingerie almost, with these dancers gyrating in this absolutely satanic fashion. I saw a report on it actually, and the songs are ranked in a couple of different ways. So the song came 6th overall. The judges ranked the songs as well, and the judges ranked the song 6th. Okay. And there was another reference to 6th. So there's a 666 kind of tie up in the
Total coincidence.
Yeah. Oh yeah, just coincidence. Nothing to see here. So how does that fit in relation to where we started with the expression of how ugly the world is in relation to what you're saying to art? In relation to the I mean, I looked at that performance and there was nothing satisfying about it. It was quite repulsive when I was looking at it, and yet then you have these these groups in Ireland, wherever, who are lauding this person for expressing whatever the hell that was being expressed.
Yeah, I mean, what you're asking is...
I'm not even too sure what I'm asking.
No,
Yeah.
what you're braising is a point, is the reality of satanic ambitions that have, I wouldn't even say captured, but in large measure, if you look into the roots of much of the cultural institutions that we take for granted because they were already there when we were born.
Yeah.
That were brought in, especially in the 60s, early 60s, via the British invasion of, the Stones, the Beatles, the Doors. There was, you could say, a satanic origin story to much of the cultural influences that one would be remiss to ignore if they wanted to really make sense of why our society has become so malleable and lacking of the capability to discern judgment, to discern intentions as ugly or beautiful intentions, which normal humans have as a natural aesthetical sensibility when they're configuring their thoughts around, well, where's my society going? What are the ideas? Is this person who's speaking to me a bullshit artist who's using flowery language, but that is simply covering a deceitful intention that is otherwise ugly? Or an ideology that is ugly, but they're using a different kind of language to cover that up by appealing to my emotions manipulatively. Normally, people who are in a healthy, integrated state would be able to discern that. And in our society, it seems like we've completely lost that and then some. And you couldn't understand that if you didn't also see what was done to create these two sorts of cultures. And this is thought through already. If you read the writings of a lot of the major cultural priests and prophets, that shapes so much of the aesthetical academic world that I experienced when I was in university, which I had to ultimately drop out of postmodernist Frankfurt School deconstructionism, as well as the banal crap too. That's in the top 40 popular music pop hits. There was an idea of reading the writings of John Ruskin, D.H. Lawrence, Ezra Pound even. They all talk in various ways as artists about the need to create two cultures that should never be allowed to coexist in the same spiritual space. A culture of the elites and a sense of arts for the elites, and one for the masses. And so that's an important idea.
Can I stop you there? So what do the elites have the right to in relation to art, and what is left for the masses? What might be an idea of that?
Well,
the elites get all the good stuff, and the masses are left with the banal or the negative, or
Well, when they say elites, they're not talking about the type of nuance that one should expect as well from reality either. The type of thing that these individuals are talking about is the idea of a slave master society. So a structure that involves the masters having one set of artistic expression or exposure to a certain quality of artistry in music as well as in the painting or other form. And the masses having a different thing. The banal art being the repetitive rhythms repeatedly intoned to make the listener more susceptible and suggestible, less capable of cultivating concentration
or higher senses, I guess, of stuff.
Higher senses, melodies that, and perhaps lyrics often associated with those things that would tend to immerse us and enmesh us with our sensual passions and lusts, instead of elevating us to liberate us from the shadows that the senses, which are beautiful and useful, but shouldn't be our controlling force. So great art is always using the senses, but to ultimately cultivate and awaken something more that would elevate us beyond the senses. And the oligarchy has utilized a certain method that they've cultivated and perfected around the idea that the elites would have a type of art that would be completely outside of and disruptive of natural sensibilities by virtue of ugliness, a cult of ugliness. So if you go to like many of the hedge funds or political science or economic departments of most of the influential universities and look at the paintings that they'll always put on the walls, and this includes Europe, North America, wherever, you'll find abstract paintings, or bar none. You won't find anything not abstract.
Which is essentially money laundering and tax evasion.
On top of that, so it serves that a dual purpose there as well. Very much tied to the mafia, so you have that. And also it's part of also a ritual. So if you want to be, let's say you're a hedge fund manager, a venture capitalist or whatever, and you want to get into one of the inner clubs, part of the initiation is to drop a few $100 million on an ugly piece of crap artwork, a piece of art, that some artist has done, who's, and usually it could have been any number of artists that were selected, because they're all kind of equally bad in their own way, but the one who might have, poured themselves out, sold their soul, is going to be granted the privilege of being
put on a pedestal.
Put on a pedestal, such that now those nouveau riche who want to get into the upper crust clubs have to drop a lot of money, and then they're granted in to be invited to some of the things, and that artificially creates a market for.
Andy Warhol?
Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah. Andy Warhol is rubbing elbows with some Satanists tied to Aleister Crowley, and
having pictures of Coca-Cola bottles, or graphics of bloody Marilyn Monroe just repeated on a frame. Yeah. So,
and there's an intellectual justification, and you could say, it's a social commentary, a critique of the hypocrisy of commercialism, and then they say, but there's ultimately a banal laziness behind it all, and they'll say, but that's part of the charm. Is the banal laziness of it all is part of the charm, and that's why it's brilliant and worth $500 million. But then again, you look at, what is Warhol doing in his personal life as well? What is Picasso doing in his personal life as well? Picasso is somebody who is another great example of almost a demigod of the arts, who's a huge influencer. Yeah. But books have been written. Arianna Huffington did a great piece on Picasso, Creator Destroyer. Yeah. And reading his personal letters, she went in there to write the book Loving Picasso, and then reading his personal letters, she came to realize that he found his creative energy off of getting women to see him as a god, to love him, and then commit suicide.
Really?
He's like a spiritual vampire.
Really?
Yeah. And there's many women in his life who he actually consciously drove them to love him as a god, as a cult figure, and then crush them, drive them to the edge and beyond. And by getting them to self-implode, he would find that source that he needed to express what he wanted to express in his creative productions.
So how many women would we
It's a good slew, a good 6 or 7, plus a son.
His son as well.
Yeah. Arianna Huffington wrote a very powerful foreword to her book, or introduction to her book, that was very insightful and very authentic in her own journey of going through all of these raw emotions as a lover of art and lover of Picasso, having to now confront something very, very just objectively ugly.
And I've seen bits and pieces of Picasso, and as an artist, he was quite clever. And I think what they have done is that they're very clever themselves in portraying cleverness as genius. And when you look at some of your Renaissance art, the complexity and the thought behind it and the scales behind it is, I would be saying some of that is genius. But to superimpose cleverness as genius, that was a clever little trick, wasn't it?
It was. Well, it became the cult of interesting. So, isn't that interesting? You know, and if you go to most of the contemporary art museums, if people have had the misfortune of doing it, they should do it. That's a word that gets bantered about quite a bit. Because ultimately, if people were being honest, they'd be like, what the hell am I looking at? It's a giant mural with a black dot in the corner. But to be, to not sound stupid or unsophisticated, there's almost this invisible wall of intimidation that students get early on, where you have to pay fealty, find some intellectual justification for the type of social commentary that the artist might have been going through when they were splattering paint randomly.
And it's also just a bit of mental masturbation, isn't it? So I could pick anything on the table, and prompting you in the right way, I can lead you on a mental journey about how either amazing or wonderful an abstract object is. Is this really a toothpick, Matt? Or
you've just made it art?
Or is there something behind this? Think about where it came from. Think about who's going to use it. Think about the entropy in relation to the food that this is picking out of a tooth, and look at how it's. I can just make shit up to you know what I mean? And that's what I feel about a lot of abstract art is there's these people making shit up to suck us in to bullshit.
Yeah, it's sophistry. That's right. No, it's a great example. Like, what causes something to become art?
Word?
It's a great one.
Can I sell this now?
You can.
Anybody want to buy this?
As soon as I think you came up with that BS academic explanation. That would be the key, the secret sauce that would give you the respect as an artist versus somebody who's not able to come up with that.
That was pretty good off the cuff, Rod, wasn't it?
That was very good. Yeah.
I might have a skill here.
You went straight into second law of thermodynamics and social commentary there. Yeah. But that's it, right? Everything is art. And if everything is art, nothing is art. It's like everything is true. Like, it's all true. And this is where the Frankfurt School attack on truth comes in. That took over our school system, that was behind the loss of any standards of objective truth within academia, within schooling, that resulted in, first, every culture has their own. You saw how that creeped in, right? We're like, okay, cultural relativism is going to be the new enlightened thing, because every culture sees the world differently. So what's true, cannibalism might be distasteful for your culture, but for that one, it's the way they've been doing it for generations, so it's okay there. So it's all relative. Everything is relative. That justice is a very different term for depending on the culture. So everything is relative. Everything is relative. And then it just expanded to the point that every feeling you have is true because it's your feeling. And then before you know it, every gender, everything you feel that you want to have sex with, a dog, a rock, you can come up with an academic gender just for you. That has its own pronoun that should be respected, and teachers could lose their careers if they don't respect the particular type of gender you've just made up out of thin air because it's your truth. Now, there's infinite truths, there's no truth. So it's the same thing for beauty, and if there's infinite beauties, there's no beauty. It loses all
positivity. And I saw something recently about a lot of these leaders in body positivity who are these really unhealthy and obese women. And there was this little collage of about 5 or 6 of these people who are dead at 30, 35, 28, 40, 41. So it's really quite sad how those poisonings or those weaknesses have been exploited. And there's people who, I don't know, is it them lacking the intellect to not see the trap behind it, or is it just this desperation because they can't break out of the trap of I don't know, eating too much, or feeling this depression within themselves, this self-loathing? What do you think that's about?
It's a good question. I don't know, man. I mean, it's if you had to. Obviously, I think people. There's something good and bad about the old way of doing things. When somebody is going through an existential crisis, I don't think that they had so much. I've heard it said that the idea of a midlife crisis is a relatively new phenomenon. And you used to be able to be, people used to be more comfortable with the reality of their mortality and the higher questions of purposefulness that gave them meaning in societies past that had more of a moral impulse to them. And I think we've sort of become dislodged from that tradition to the point that now people are going in crises. They'll, when they otherwise are just they should have been realizing that they didn't resolve some of the paradoxes of their finiteness and the fact that their dicks aren't going to work someday, and they're going to get more wrinkly as time goes by, and that's part of the process.
I think it's slightly different, and I think it is a modern thing, midlife crisis, which we maybe didn't have before. But I think at a certain stage, as we're developing and as we're maturing, as we're getting a little bit older, there is only so many layers. There are, should I say, only so many layers that we can use to suppress reality. And it's quite interesting for me that it seems to be that you could actually argue that I have gone through crisis, and I would say it quite differently. When you see the world in a certain way, when you wake up to the truths that we've discussed, and as we're seeing them, I had no choice but to do something about it. So quit the very good job in healthcare. I couldn't endorse the things that health system was doing to people. Some of these guys who have the midlife crisis, they're in. A cliche might be that shitty relationship where they're not having sex, or they haven't had sex with the missus for 10 years. She's overweight, he's overweight, his dick's not working. He realizes that he's only got a few more years left before he has any chance of recapturing some of that youth. So it's this realization about the futility of this thing that he's devoted the last 15, 20 years to. And 100 years ago or 200 years ago, I'm suggesting at times we didn't have that. You had the farmer who was just devoted to creation and growing things and seeing his family.
That's sort of what I'm thinking. I would agree with that. No, and I don't think necessarily crises have a place. You've been living in a lie, and you all of a sudden decide to start focusing on looking at the truth, even if most people around you are living in a lie. The fact of making that shift, that willful decision, is going to result in emotional disturbances, disruptions,
and
all sorts of
sometimes
things.
It's a jump from one shitty situation because these people don't know any better. So that same fella, 50 years old, whatever he is, he feels that his new way of truth is to get the Lamborghini and to get a tattoo and to get which is back to the same trap. But he doesn't know any better in relation to get out of it. But the point being that there is a progression of maturity where he sees there's something wrong and he's compelled to do something about it.
There's an absence of substance that was shaping his identity, and the recognition of that absence of substance results in crisis. Now, how you resolve that?
Some people do it successfully, and some people end up repeating those patterns of behavior.
And they end up relapsing back into an attempt to do something that they think they missed out on in high school. And they're like, now I have the resource that I didn't have in high school. Now I'm going to do it right, and I'll be satisfied, because then I couldn't get that Lamborghini when I was in high school. Now I can, and you're still not satisfied. Though you got a bit of a thrill in the moment.
Because they haven't addressed some much more profound ways of dealing with life.
That's right. No, that's a good point, and that's where I think that you've got the healthy crisis, which is more ontological. And there's an opportunity in every crisis. It's a cliche, but it's a true one. And I think that art should normally help both create the good crisis. So in the sense, this is the way the Frankfurt School is successful, is because they're taking elements of what I just said. That's also what they say. That the artist's job is to bring the viewer, the people in society, to a crisis. True. Agreed. And if you look at a Shakespearean classical tragedy or Schillerian tragedy, or a great piece of music, I mentioned the Beethoven dissonant quartets, or the Requiem, there's a melancholy, there's a mortality, there's a longing for immortality embedded in it, or The Death and the Maiden by Schubert. These are pieces that bring you a profound sadness, but also a quality of joy that coexist as a mixed emotion. and it's not something you can get from either the abstract, sophisticated high art or the low art of the banal masses that just want to go to a rave. You can't get that quality of what some might call the universal sentiments,
or even of the range. The range is much more sophisticated and all that, as opposed to listening to and
one is just
being hypnotized.
And one is just dissonance. Like if you look at the atonalist, the Schoenberg atonalism of the high art abstract
whatever
music.
that is.
Yeah, it's the music that is devoid. It's aggressively anti-melodic.
Okay.
So it's sort of the musical expression of the abstract or contemporary artistic expression.
So is there an easy example for somebody like myself?
Well, it's very forgettable pieces.
Yeah.
Even the famous piece by Schoenberg, who's a famous atonalist.
Yeah.
Stravinsky was maybe somebody who opened the door to some of these demons, but the Rite of Spring is one example of something that opened the door as a piece, as an opera, which began as a pagan ritual. When you look at the Rite of Spring, I think it opened in 1911 or 1912, and it starts first seen as a pagan ritual of a woman dancing herself to death in a pagan sacrifice to some earth deity, Mother Earth deity. And the whole thing sort of is an affront, a conscious, willful affront on the classical melodic, especially German musical tradition of Mozart, of Beethoven, of Schubert, Schumann, Brahms, that was consciously undermined by this new school that, again, gave rise to a new space in which a Schoenberg would later emerge in the 20s. Taking it even further as the natural deconstruction of order around this idea that we will be pure and unfiltered emotion, unbounded by the tyranny of reason. But his pieces are so you have to force yourself over many years as an artist to. And I've heard I'm not a pianist, but I've heard proficient pianists talk about their experience that I resonate with. To play in this type of anti-melodic, anti-temporal, this fashion, which is actually chaotic, and intentionally ugly.
You know, I've got a thought, and I'm not sure if we're going to have enough time to do this, so I'm going to throw this out there. But as a kind of a semi-part two to this discussion, if we got enough time, I'd love to sit down with you with a computer and have a similar discussion with this, but actually open up YouTube.
Yeah, and play some demos.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's do it.
And then align that with this conversation, because I think I feel what you're saying, but I'd love to actually hear what you're saying.
Let's do that with a couple of musical examples, and we'll do that with a couple of artistic paintings.
And to give people a really clear example, because I'm fascinated by what you're saying.
Oh, cool.
And I feel this little urge behind me to go, oh fuck, I'd love to
put some meat on the bones
together with what he's saying.
Yeah, let's put some meat on the bones to that with a little YouTube video or two. And like I said, there's some wonderful, and you can only do that with case studies. And I think visual case studies with some examples, because not all realism is created equal, and like people often put everything under this umbrella of classical art, which isn't. Yeah. There's some really bad classical art, and one of the things that was done by Ruskin, especially, who is the sort of father of a lot of the modern aesthetics, is he framed this false debate between realism that he said is classical, and in opposition to the impressionist feeling state of the arts that he was also promoting through Turner's work. You know, this British painter who was doing a lot of
Haywain, I think, was one of his. Was it Turner, or that Constable was the Haywain? But Turner had those lovely
colors, cadmiums, lights. He was very clever with his use of light and motion
and landscapes. Mostly, was it?
A lot of water scenes, tumultuous water scenes. A lot of landscapes. Sort of a bridge that opened up the door to what became the Impressionists.
Yeah. See, I do know something about art.
Yeah. But the debate was dishonestly framed, because if you look at the types of exemplars of classical painting that he wanted to showcase as oppositional or to the other more liberating school, there were paintings and painters specifically that were just painting what was in the frame. Literalists. You could have taken a photograph and it would have been no different. Yeah. And it's like, it takes aptitude to do that, but that's not classical painting. That's just realism. It's cold, dead realism. There's nothing more than the sum total of what is being seen, such that it is suffocating. One cannot deny that it is suffocating. Just to do that and keep it at like vases and vases and vases of flowers and arrangements. And at a certain point, if it's only that you're limiting it to, beyond just being an exercise of portraying beauty, like portraying like the visual aspect of lower order natural beauty, if that's all you say it is, then, and you say that your only other choice then is to be liberated by having just an unbounded emotional expression where the colors, the lights, everything is just there to express your feelings, unbounded by any type of rational thought, then you've just cut you've cut out a vast swath of reality, because classical paintings are utilizing a technique, like a technical proficiency at being able to express realism, but it's not limited to that. There's always something more than the sum total of elements chosen by the artist within the painting. That is the purpose of the painting. The painting's purpose or its identity is not within the painting itself. It's also outside of it.
I'm going to try and ask you about some examples, because I don't quite get it, I think. So if I were to take a photograph of, one of these classic award-winning photographs of an old man obviously in grief, or, some child looking grief-stricken in war, and I have the ability to convey that in a hyper-realistic way onto canvas, and you can't tell the difference. Have I not done something, I don't know, conveying an emotion?
You have.
Okay.
But great photography and great painting both conveys an emotion as well as the visual expression of it at the same time. Whereas when I'm saying, because you could also have photographers who are doing classical photography, because what makes that so good is that there's something more than the man sitting there that is the source of what makes people like it. There's this pain, there's this context that the artist is both framing visually. He's setting up the lighting, but he's also it's everything more than what you're seeing as the physical dude sitting on a rock in a war-torn country or something, or having gone through some pain.
Sure. So back to what you were saying before, then the I don't know, the vase after vase after vase. I'm trying to get my head around what makes. I don't know. Could you put in there, I don't know, one of the flowers in the vase that has started to droop, which signifies that, are we going back then to the mental masturbation of making shit up to
That's
make
where it becomes a fine balance, right? There's a fine.
Is there a gray area?
There's a gray area.
Gotcha. Okay. That's nice. Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah. That's why Chinese classical paintings. Lang Xining or Li Bai from the Tang Dynasty, they do a lot of. It's very symbolic. Yeah. But there's a language that is embedded in a cultural understanding that is sort of embedded in the soul of the culture, that's expressed when a chrysanthemum is portrayed. There is something, a meaning that is not esoteric either. Yeah. It's not an esoteric meaning known only to the inner elites through a mystery school. Mm-hmm. It's something which is part of the folklore of the people. It's something built into the soul of the people that's being expressed when you see a chrysanthemum portrayed by a painter for an emperor in celebration of a victory in a battle or whatever. There's something to do with the fact that chrysanthemum is known to grow only in very harsh climates. Okay. And there's a deep, rich metaphor, but again, it's intelligible to everybody. It's not esoteric, and I think that's the thing that's different between the Neoplatonic, like Hermetic schools that infested much of the Renaissance classical painting movement, which infused a lot of black magic and witchcraft into
Neoplatonic.
Neoplatonic is a school that is anti-Platonic, but that acts on the surface as though they are. It's like the Hermetic, the followers of Hermes Trismegistus, that followed in the Renaissance period the thinking of people like Ficino, who is a major influencer in Florence, who is reviving a lot of the alchemy, numerology, Kabbalism.
So are you saying that the Neoplatonic, Hermetic kind of idea is dragging you towards more that secret, esoteric type of stuff that's only for the people who have the secret handshake?
Because it means whatever. It is just those who have chosen to come up with any given cipher to associate a certain meaning to a variety of symbolic things that, like whatever, it's a certain number sequencing or certain Masonic rituals that will have certain visual elements that might be infused into a still life or into a painting that only those in the know
So you
will
can
know how to
look at
read
it,
it.
but we actually know what it's about. So
Yes.
okay.
So they consciously create an elitism because only those who have been through that rite of initiation will be granted the cipher meaning of what that is, versus those who are ignorant might just see a pretty flower next to a cross and a skull, and they'll be like, oh, pretty flower, cross, and a skull, and the other person who's been through the initiated circle as an elitist will become necessarily more elitist because they feel that they have this special knowledge, and thus their ability to just have their natural human emotions that make us human is going to be highly reduced, because now they have that feeling of being almost a superior caste above those other lowly ignorant humans who are not privy to such things.
And they set us up with that, don't they? And they kind of have these trainings that we get, and it's almost like it's the same thing of, you know, if you can't sit in a room and stare at a blue bloody, I don't know, 6x6 painting with a red dot in the center, and if you can't work out the depth of meaning behind it, there's something wrong with you. But of course, if you can, you may be allowed into our little highly intellectualized and sophisticated group. So they're throwing out these bullshit ideas which we fall into. They're traps, aren't they?
That's a great way of putting it. They're completely traps. And most people just so desperately want to be part of the inner circle, or they want at the very least
be special. They want to be admired by the people on the pedestal.
Yeah, and that's a failure. That's a loss of sovereignty. As soon as you choose to make that how you choose to respond to a situation of judgment, because judging is a sacred thing. It's abused. Judge not, right? Everyone's like, don't judge. And it's like, no, you shouldn't judge irresponsibly, but judge lest ye be judged. So be prepared to have cleaned up your own act, so that you're prepared to receive judgment if you're going to judge something else. So judge well, measure 5 times, cut once, right? And most people skip that step. But they misuse those opportunities, and then instead they allow that lower slavish feeling or that fear feeling of what am I gonna be seen. I don't want to sound stupid.
And
I want to be respected by people with power.
And I think hugely in the school system. So you start off as a little fella, and you got the people above you, and you aspire to be like them, and that's got this hierarchy.
That's why the frat system is so big, and especially in North America, but it's everywhere. But especially bad in the USA.
And
Phi
UK
Beta
as
Kappa,
well.
UK too, right? Everyone wants to be part of the Skull and Bones or that sorority or whatever, and they got to go through degrading rituals. They want to be degraded. And they give up something of their own sovereignty when they do that. And then if they don't shake that off of them before they go into the workforce, and they're going to become candidates for fascism later on, and possibly the administrators of said fascism that lose their ability to just be animated by their natural sense of conscience, aesthetic senses that are just natural within every child. They'll lose that increasingly, and they'll become instruments for a higher will that they can no longer understand the will that is now replacing their own once free will. And they think that they have free will and agency, but they don't. And so you got these human tools.
So okay, I think we're probably going on an hour now. So to round off, what have we spoken about? I think it's very important what we just talked about. So are we just talking about maybe a level of critical thinking which aligns beautifully with the presentation that yourself and Cynthia did, the presentation, should I say, of having a little bit more of a critical judgment to see through some of these offerings that were given. Is that kind of what the conversation has been about?
So.
Do you think?
Yeah, because that's what I was appreciating most about the people I've been meeting is that yearning to see beyond the sum total of the information the senses are given to a higher causal realm where intentions and ideas exist. So we're all yearning to resonate our minds to those higher realities where first truths, first principles are located. And it would make sense then that we would take this little journey through this question of what's animating my identity. Cynthia has a similar sort of set of experiences from her own way. And back through the domain of the battles throughout artistic expression, because again, like we were talking a lot about during my presentation on open versus closed systems, to the degree that we are led to believe that the human mind and the human condition is a degenerate thing that either is only supposed to be purely logical and uncontaminated by emotions if we want to be scientific, or purely emotional and uncontaminated by reason if we want to be artistic. To the degree that we have this like schism in our wholeness, we can't actually think as humans, and we could always be convinced that some form of algorithm machine can do human better than us, and we won't understand that what it is that makes us truly divine at the end of the day, and that the oligarchy, because there is an oligarchy, is afraid of this quality being recognized within those they would wish to victimize and corral as willing slaves. They're afraid of this thing being recognized within us and acted accordingly. So yeah, we should do more of that which scares the oligarchy, and I think the domain of arts, music and painting especially, express that fight wonderfully.
I like that a lot as a way to round it off. Just that idea that we have to explore that divine power within us and not get pulled away to the bullshit that's been put out there by the oligarchs with their false logic.
Yeah, that's a nice way to round it out, I guess.
Excellent. We're probably going to have another one each. I've got to pull you up again before we part ways, my
We have
friend.
to look at some paintings and listen to some music. So let's do it.
Yeah. Okay, man.
Sweet.
Awesome.
All right.
Like it.
Thanks, man.